All right, advanced variables are the single most important feature in the node graph in Halo Infinite. They are insane in what it allows you to do. So I'm going to start off by making another script brain, and I guess to explain, if you've experimented in the node graph, you might have seen that there's variables basic. So there's like the ability to have like a Boolean or like a number, and you can like wire these in to other nodes. Like you can set the number by, you know, coming over and selecting it and changing the value up here to like, let's say 7, or you know, you change it to 7, and then you can set the Boolean to like true or false. And this is great. This allows you to like, you know, feed information into nodes that require a number. Specifically, the vector 3 is also really nice. You use this a lot for like, you know, like offsetting items or positioning things in a very specific spot in the world, or, you know, or adding velocity to an object. But the problem with these nodes is that they don't actually store data persistently, and you can't change them. Well, I guess they are persistent, but you can't actually change the data when you hit the play mode. When you come into the play mode here, you actually can't do anything. You can't actually tell it, like, hey, that number 7 that we just set here, we want it to be 8 now. So the variables, the system that actually allows you to change that is the variables advanced. And they're gonna look a little complicated. So there are 3 types of advanced variable nodes. There is the declare, there is the get, and then there is the set. So we have the declare, get, and set number variable nodes. And I guess we're gonna start with the declare, because this is you have to have a declare to be able to set or get a number. You have to declare it first. You basically have to tell the game that, hey, I want you to create a number with the identifier that we set here. So an identifier, think of the identifier as just the name to like reference that the number. So like, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna change the identifier to like, you know, let's call this level. Or you could change this to like money. Or, you know, any of the, you know, you could change this identifier to whatever you want. I'm just gonna call this number for the identifier number just for testing. So that's the first thing, the identifier. So if the identifier here needs to be the same across all nodes. So this is how you reference it. Next is the initial value, which is, this is like the default value that it comes out with. So if you wanted it to, by default, have the number 7, right now, if I declare a number with initial value 7, this is no different than what we had up set before with the variables basic. We go variables basic number and change this to 7. These two are more or less the same if you never use these 2 other nodes. These are almost identical. Well, you obviously have to get the number, but I guess these 2 nodes in this node, these are basically identical. Where this becomes powerful is well, I guess we talk about the scope next. So the scope, this can get complicated. The object scope is a little complicated, but the other 2 scopes are easy to understand. The global scope means that if you declare a variable of scope global, it's accessible in any script brain. So in this script brain, or that script brain, or this script brain, you can reference this number variable. You can reference this number variable of the identifier that you set here, which I just called number. Let's call it number var, just for clarity. So, you know what? You know, why would you? You know, this is all cool and all until you actually start using the set number variable. So to be able to change this number, so let's build out a little example here. Let's say when the player crouches. So let's go to players. Sorry, events players on player crouch. So let's say every time the player crouches, we want to make this number value go up by 1. With the variables basic number, you can't actually change this number in the play mode, but with the advanced variables you can. So let's move the declare variable up. Now also, I guess I missed the other 2 variable scopes. So there's global is the entire, all script brains can use it. Local is just this script brain. Everything within the script brain that is declared in. So wherever this is declared will only be accessible from in the script brain. I'll talk about the object scope variable in a minute because it's a little complicated. I just want to show how these actually work because they're very useful. So let's say, like the demo I said before, when the player crouches, we're going to make this number go up by 1. So what we're going to do is when the player crouches, we're going to get this set number variable node, and we're going to wire this up, and we're going to make the identifier. So also inside the variables basic, I should probably talk about this. You've noticed that I've been typing in the identifier. You don't have to always type that identifier in. There's actually a variables basic node of identifier. Where's it at? Am I blind? Identifier. Inside of the variables basic tab, there's an identifier, which this and the identifier here, this is you connect these two together, and you can call this number var like we did before, and this is functionally equivalent. They're the same thing. It's just this is potentially a little bit more clear. I avoid using the identifiers here just because all the connections it makes the node graph look very messy. So instead, I like to type them in manually. So onto the incrementing this number variable by 1 every time that we crouch. So what we need to do is how do you increment a number? Well, you need to know what the number is. So if you want to add a number to 5, well, you need to know what the number 5 is. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the number. We're going to get the number variable here. Make sure that the identifiers are the same, and also the scope needs to be the same as well as the declared number here. If you have issues with the event variables being weird, the scopes need to match. If it's declared as a local scope, when you get it or set it, it also needs to be that same scope, in this case, local. So we're going to get the number. So like I said before, if you have the number 7, in this case, it defaults to 7. How do you add 1 to that? If you don't know what the number 7 is, you can't add 1 to it. Nothing plus 1 is just 1. So we're going to go to the math node real quick. You see the math category and add. And we're going to add the number variable plus 1. So we're getting the number stored in this advanced variable, and we're adding 1 to it. And then we're going to run the result of that into the value of the set number variable. And we're also going to make sure that we set the identifier of the set number variable to the same name that these two others have. So we have identifier number variable, and number variable. They all need to be the same, obviously, because we're referring to one piece of data. And also, like I said, the scope has to match as well. So this will work, but actually it's going to be hard to visualize because if I open this, let me go and remove the errors real quick. Hold on. There we go. So if I crouch, you're going to see it's working. You just can't see it. So to visualize it, there's a node inside the UI tab called print number to kill feed. So after we set this number, I'm going to copy this node over and get the number again after we set it and then print it to the kill feed. So you're going to notice when I hit play, it's actually going to print the number out to the kill feed. So what you should expect is the number 8. So I crouch and then it says number 8, and then there's a little something special about how the player crouch node works. It's actually called twice, one on crouch and one on crouch up. So it's called on crouch down and up. So you're going to notice when I crouch, it's called once, and then when I uncrouch, it's called again. So every full crouch increments it by 2. It go 1 on the down, 1 on the up. So as you can see, as I'm spamming crouch, it's up 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So this allows you to store, data. Obviously, this is a pretty useless example. There's a lot of ways you can actually use this. Let's say if you kill a person, you want to increase their level or whatever. Or there's a lot of creative ways you can use this that I'm not going to go into. I'm just trying to show how it functions. So on to the complicated part. So there's not just number variables. So all the nodes in the variables of basic variables advanced work the same. So there's the declared nade type, the number variable, the object list. All these work the same. They just have a different input. So this is a variable of an object list. So this will store a list of objects. They all work the same. They just hold different types of data. So onto the difficult part. Now, this is a little difficult to wrap your head around at first, I think. And that is the final scope, the object scope. Global and local, I feel like, are pretty self-explanatory, because global means you can use it from other script brains. Local means just the script brain it was declared in. Object is weird because when you declare an object variable, every single dynamic object gets their own unique instance of this variable. Now that's a lot of words and really confusing, and if that makes sense to you, good. But to clarify, you probably already already understand how this works. So like each player has their own shield and HP value. So like if I was to take damage right now, like if I was to hit myself with a grenade, everyone on the game wouldn't also take damage because the HP is unique to my individual player. Well, when you declare an object scope variable, it works in a very similar way to how each player has their own HP pool and their own ammo count for their weapons and their own kills and their own, each player has their own data that belongs to them. That is exactly how the object scope variables work. But when I said before, every single dynamic object gets this variable. So not just players, even vehicles, anything that is set to dynamic will also have their own variable as well. So, let's create a couple buttons to kind of demonstrate this. So if we go to the scripting tab and go to buttons, I'm going to create a couple buttons to help visualize this. So I'm going to create a button on the left and a button on the right. And I'm going to call this button underscore left, button underscore right. And I'm going to reference these in our script brain. This is just for testing, so you can actually visualize this. So we're going to check, and I think it's an events custom on object interacted. This is how you read a button. We're not covering buttons, so this isn't important. This is just for testing. I'll make a separate video on buttons, but this is how you actually know when a button is actually pressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two dynamic, let's duplicate two vehicles over here. Let's take a vehicle. Oh, come on, let me duplicate, game. Okay, fine, I'll do it manually. Vehicles. Let's create a ghost. And let's create a, I don't know what else after I place this. Something else. So we have a ghost, and we have, let's just go primitives block, and turn this primitive block into a dynamic object by coming over to the cog and going from static to dynamic. And we'll change the variant to something bigger so it's not just a tiny little thing. So here we have two dynamic objects. And like I said before, the player is also a dynamic object. So this example will also work for a player. If this was a player instead, it would also work. Remember that. So we have two dynamic objects. And I'm going to reference them in the node graph by selecting them, coming into here. And we have the ghost, which is going to be for the left button. And the primitive block is going to be for the right button. So what we're going to do is when the left button is pressed, we're going to print out this ghost's number variable. So I'm going to duplicate these over. So we're going to get the number variable. I'll explain this. I'll go into bit detail in a moment. So we declared the number variable as an object scope. And you might have noticed, what the hell is you're going to notice on these set object nodes and these get object nodes, there's this bottom connection here called object. And for global and local scope, they aren't used. You actually don't need this to be filled in. You do need it filled in for an object scope, because this is actually how you read data from a particular object. That might make more sense in a second. So we get the get object number variable inside. Make sure again the scope is object, because we declared it in object scope, and the identifier is the same. And I'm also going to get copy the print number to kill feed over here. So when the left button is interacted, we're going to print a number to the kill feed, and that number is going to be this number variable, and we're going to wire it up. See, this is the exact setup you would do with a normal, like, local or global variable, but you also have to fill in the object. So the object we actually want to read from is the ghost. So I'm going to take this ghost and wire it into this object here. What this means is that we are getting the number called number var that belongs to the ghost, and we're printing it out to the kill feed. So we declared it to have a default value of 7. So if I run this actually, and we come over and press that button, the left button, you're going to notice it's going to print out 7, which is exactly the same as we were doing before. If I press the button, it says 7. It's like, okay, well, that's the same way it was working before, except it isn't. If I was to come over here, and let's go on the events, let's just go like on let me think of a more creative way to show this. Where's the on damage node at? On object damage. So what we're gonna do is when this ghost takes damage, we are going to increase, like we did up here, that number. We're going to increase this number variable by 1. So we're going to need to get another number variable. You know, we have to do what we did again. So I'm going to try to separate these out so it's not so spaghetti code looking. So we have on object damage, and we also want to get another print to kill feed, because we want to be able to visualize this for the example. This print to kill feed is obviously optional. This is just to help you understand what's happening. So when this object is damaged, we're going to set a number variable. We're basically, what I'm doing is I'm recreating the example we did up here, but for an object scope variable. So when this object is damaged, we're going to set a number variable of number var. We need to make sure the scope here is also local. Object. Remember, all the scopes need to be the same. And when we get the number variable, we need to make sure we're reading it from the ghost, because with an object scope variable, we're trying to read the number variable that belongs to the ghost. So we're going to wire that in here when we get this, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to copy the add node back over, and we're going to take the value of the number like we did here, where we're incrementing, we're getting the number and adding 1 to it and then setting it back. We're going to do the same thing here, to where we take the value, add 1 to it, and then set it back to itself. You also need to remember to take the ghost when you set it, because we're working with object scope again. Since you need to tell the number variable, hey, which object do you actually want to read from, you also need to tell it which object you want to set from. So we take the ghost and we wire it over here to the object. And since the names are the same and the scope is the same, and the ghost is being fed into both of these, if I was to come over here to the number variable, and then I was to copy this over, you might not need to copy that over, but I'm just for clarity. So I'm going to also connect this over. This number here, this is just for visualization. So we're going to get the number. We're going to print. Back up a little bit. When the ghost takes damage, we are going to set a number variable that belongs to the ghost. We're going to get the number variable that belongs to the ghost, the number var that belongs to the ghost, and we're going to add 1 to it and then set it back so that we can actually, so it's saving. So this is the equivalent, like, of saving it. So These 3 nodes here are just basically get the number variable that belongs to the ghost and add it to, +1. What is the variable +1? What does that come out to be? And then also save that back. And then after that, we're going to print the number to kill feed. So if we come over here and we press the button, well, actually, it's going to do it twice. So we can print it. So I guess I don't really need the button example. This button example is kind of like, these are 2 ways of reading it. Technically, I don't need this if I want to do the undamaged approach. But you're going to notice, let me set up the button actually for the other object. So, because this will make it more clear. So instead of on the on button right, let me get the number variable just so that we can see that these numbers are actually belong to the particular object. So we take the primitive block and we're just going to, instead of printing it out here, we're going to delete the button left for now. And we're going to delete that. Shit. A little confusing. I could have been cleaner about this. So when the right button is pressed, we are going to print the kill feed we're going to print to the kill feed the number variable that belongs to the block. Let me here. There we go. So when the right button is pressed, we are printing out the primitive block's number variable. And when we shoot, so over here, when we do damage or when we shoot or when the ghost takes damage, we're going to add 1 to it, to the ghost's number variable, and then also print it out. So this is going to demonstrate that these object scope variables each one of them have their own unique instance. So if I come over here and I press the right button, we have a 7 here. Obviously, if I shoot this one, it doesn't work because we didn't wire this one up to increment its number when we shoot it, so it's still 7. If I come over here and I shoot the ghost, you're going to notice the number 8 gets put in the kill feed, 9, 10, 11. But now you're going to notice, once I come over here and press this button, it still says it's 7. Because when the ghost takes damage, we're only setting the ghost's object scope variable and not the cube's. So that's kind of what I'm trying to express here, that both objects have the same identifier number variable, the same named variable. In this case, it's called number var. Both the primitive block and the ghost have the same object variable, the object scope variable named number var, but they don't. The data isn't shared, and you can reference them through these object the object nodes at the bottom when the scope is set to object. And obviously it needs to be, we need to declare these numbers. They need to be set to declare object. And this is true. This would be true with any object in the scene. So if I wanted to instead, let's say this object, I'm going to reference the furthest right Razorback instead of the ghost. I'm not doing anything special with the ghost here. If I was to come in and drop in and I was to remove the ghost, actually, an easy way you can do this. If you come here and open up this object's properties, you can actually point this object reference to a new thing, and I'm going to point it to that Razorback. Razorback 3, which is the furthest right Razorback here, the one I have selected. And you're going to notice when I shoot this Razorback, it's also going to increment its number +1, proving that every single unique object in the scene has its own instance of the variable that you declared. Now, obviously, we did it with a number here, and the example's pretty useless. But you can have I don't know the limit on the amount of object variables you can have, but you can have quite a few. So you can declare a team variable, or you can declare a vector3 variable, and these can all be object scoped. If you wanted to store vector3 on a player for some particular reason, you could, or any of these variables, you can have them belong to that particular object, which is incredibly useful for reducing the amount of nodes that you need to accomplish a task. Because imagine if this object scope didn't exist, you would have to create a local scope variable like this for like like this of local or global for every single object in the scene that you wanted to have its own unique data, and you'd have to like name it something special, like, you know, like Ghost 2 or 3 or whatever. And that's like very like why you know, that's insane. So the solution to that is use object scope variables. So I really hope that made sense. Object scope variables are really fucking complicated, and they at the same time are very powerful. Almost every map that you're going to play is going to use them in some way. And I hopefully that helped. If it's confusing, I made a new help channel in the Discord. To try and to, like, you know, organize the absolute nightmare that's happening in the Forge channel. It's moving like really fast. So if you need help, the help channel, and I'll try my best to explain it. But yeah.